Okay, so today I'll be talking about the political satirist and where exactly they fit in our KPM model. So let's get right into it. We'll look at our little model here, and um, this is my own little version. Obviously, it's the same thing, but I had to use little different figures here. But here's our first-hand knowledge. This is obviously people's experiences, people who have lived, and really their own take on a certain situation or something like that. Our second hand, these are our journalists that take the information straight from these first-hand accounts and the people that are whatever the story's about. That's that firsthand. Then we have our little division, our little line here, and that is where there's obviously a little bit divide as to the secondhand knowledge and that secondhand removed, and the third hand knowledge. There's that little divide because we know that the secondhand knowledge isn't always accurate, isn't always what it as advertised, right? So there's that secondhand removed, good informed citizen getting it directly from the um, secondhand, kind of having an open mind, and then obviously we have our third hand, that is our little bubble. So now where do we put our buddy John Stewart here, our political satirist? Where does he fit in this model? Obviously, he's not first-hand knowledge because he isn't, he isn't obviously. If we're doing, for example, COVID-19, he isn't a doctor that's treating or a scientist that's trying to make a vaccine, right? He isn't this first-hand. He obviously isn't this third-hand knowledge that he's not in his own little bubble where he only sees right or left, right? Um, the question is now, where do we place him as far as secondhand and secondhand removed? Now, I believe that he is right here on this line. So he isn't exactly the secondhand, right? As John Oliver said in one of his videos that we watched, he isn't exactly the secondhand. He isn't getting it directly from the first hand. He isn't doing any real reporting. But then again, he isn't really secondhand removed because he's still informing these citizens in his own little way. So I put him right on the line because he is obviously still informing these secondhand removed, and I guess even some of the third-hand knowledge. Now, how they take his message is neither here nor there. But um, yeah, I'd put him right in the middle of the line. So how do I define this political satire as a whole? Well, as we read in our chapter one uh, reading here, satire has obviously separated itself into its own genre, right? It isn't it isn't a news show, but it isn't comedy at the same time, right? It uses humor um, for the listener to remove themselves from the social norms and to think critically. So it uses the humor in that sense, but it's also used to think critically, right? And while the news is obviously the most meaningful form of discourse, right? You should be getting your information through NBC, through CBS, reputable sources like that. Satire can still provide meaningful insight, right? Um, News is very limited in what they can discuss and what sort of discourse they can entertain, right? They need to kind of give a little bit of the left and a little bit of the right, while as um, satirist can kind of has that protection where they can go in and give not exactly completely false information, but maybe a little, I'd say, kind of stretching it out a little bit. You know what I mean? Kind of little, little bit further out there, something along those lines. And I'll try to get into that a little bit as we talk about a contemporary issue. Now, I used an example that I kind of watched. It was a John Oliver video that he did on Andrew Cuomo's investigation, as exactly how these political satirists attack and kind of how they inform and give that meaningful insight. So in Oliver's piece, he identified what the government was being investigated for, and as a lot of us know, Como obviously has been under attack for misinforming the public. Um, the figures of how many people are getting were getting COVID-19 and people who died in New York, in order to get the numbers low, so couldn't be used against him in a federal investigation if it would come to that. So it kind of identified that, used little clips from an NBC package, and then I think he kind of compared it to, like, I think he said, like, North Korea, who has reported no COVID patients, right? Which is obviously we know isn't true. And it's a little far fetched, but it kind of gives you that, you know, it kind of gives you that insight, and removes you from that social norm of, like, oh my god, I can't believe this guy just compared Andrew Cuomo to Kim Jong Un, which obviously I don't think he, again, it was kind of a joke, which is part of the political satire genre as a whole. And then he talks about how Cuomo directly blames staffers as opposed to himself. The staff obviously being the people inside the nursing home facilities, and he kind of compared that to him. And you could see, while he obviously was. Well, let me move on to this next hand account to make this a little bit more clear. He then brought in a first-hand account from a former staffer that said that Cuomo attacked him for he attacked him and said that if he leaked that Cuomo had misconstrued the numbers, that this guy will never work again. And while Cuomo obviously denied these allegations, it's kind of within his character to do so. And then that's when he kind of goes on to attack his character a little bit, talking about his, silly little things he does with his brother on CNN, his little segments that they kind of just joke around about at home and stuff like that. And then his meaningless press conferences, which this was really a good point. Cuomo, in his investigation, talked about, he put this quote from this philosopher saying that we need to know the facts, and by the facts we'll go from there, right? But obviously these facts are being misconstrued. That perfect part of political satire there, where they say one thing, the message is, we're going by the facts, while on the other hand, these facts are completely misinformed. And that really just outlines kind of how the political satire or the satirists will go at a certain issue. They take an issue that they find to be wrong, they put their own little spin on it, put a little humor in there, and you can kind of see where they fit on our KPM model.